If reports are to be believed, the straight-edge superstar CM Punk is set to make his wrestling return this Friday at the First Dance edition of AEW Rampage. Punk, a product of the grassroots independent scene, was hugely passionate about his craft. His love for the business could be seen during his final entrance for Ring of Honor back in 2006. Tears rolling down his face, Punk said goodbye as he moved on to the big time. Fast forward 8 years, he was sick, he was hurt, and his passion was gone, and he wanted nothing to do with wrestling anymore. Somehow, WWE ground Punk down from being one of the most dedicated workers wrestling has ever seen, turning him into someone who hated wrestling so much that he has been gone for 7 years at this point to pursue other career paths in comic book writing, acting, and even MMA. However, the man who declared he'll never come back is doing just that. But did you know this isn't the first time he's been back in the ring since 2014? Most fans believe that Punk hasn't been seen in wrestling since the Royal Rumble match of that year. However, this is not the case, as he has made several small appearances under a mask. So today, let's take a look at CM Punk's secret return to wrestling. The former 5-time WWE champion had humble beginnings in the independent wrestling scene, with his first appearances on smaller promotions throughout the Midwest. He was trained and mentored by fellow Chicago native Ace Steel at the Steel Dominion Wrestling School. The majority of Punk's early matches would take place in the state of Wisconsin, and most notably for this story, he would work shows out of the Knights Columbus Hall in West Allis. This was not only the home of many of his early bouts, but it is also the home of the first match between Colt Cabana and CM Punk, at least on record. Of course, Punk would go on to work his way up the circuit, finding his way into Ring of Honor before making it to the big time when he signed with WWE back in 2005. Despite working in large arenas and stadiums all across the world, it seems Punk hasn't forgotten his roots, as on April 19, 2019, Punk would return to the Knights of Columbus Hall for one last dance. The venue had been the host of wrestling for almost 3 decades, but was set to be torn down after a recent buyout. This led to MKE Wrestling hosting their final event in the hall, billed as the Last Night, with a K of course. This momentous night set the scene for the return of one of its most famous residents, as during a match involving the aforementioned Ace Steel, a mystery man would run in and hit his opponent Derek St. Holmes with the famous GTS before exiting just as quickly as he entered, giving Ace the advantage and leading to a pinfall. MKE Wrestling posted a short clip of the incident to Twitter, which immediately sparked talk that it was in fact CM Punk. Silas Young, the owner of the promotion, then seemingly gave the game away by tweeting, "Last night we held MKE Wrestling at the Knights of Columbus building in West Allis. The place was packed with 350 people. This place had 25 plus years of wrestling and is the place a lot of guys started. Guys like Colt Cabana, as well as a Punk who showed up in a mask last night." What occurred that night was definitely more than the patrons bargained for, but it seemed they didn't even know it at the time. More proof that it was indeed who we think it is appears in the hoodie worn by the Masked Man and the hoodie worn by Punk earlier that day. That afternoon, Punk had been at a nearby amateur wrestling tournament at West Allis Central High School, and he happened to take a picture with one of the students, Brett Danner. This image was then posted to Instagram by the student. As you can see, Punk is wearing the exact same clothing as the Masked Man, with the Violent Gentleman Hockey Club written across his chest. It was later confirmed by Wrestling Inc. that the individual was indeed CM Punk, and they revealed some details on the behind the scenes leading up to the event. According to the report, Punk was originally planning on taking the mask off after hitting the GTS, but as we know, this didn't end up happening. They were also told that Punk waited outside the venue in his car up until the run-in and then left immediately afterwards. If that isn't enough proof, Silas Young, the previously mentioned promoter of WKE Wrestling, spoke to Fightful almost a year after the event to reveal that the Masked Man was indeed Punk, or at least he thinks it was, and revealed how the moment came together and said, "The building that happened in had wrestling in it for 26 or 27 years and had got bought out. It was getting torn down. That was the building I think Punk had his first wrestling match. I had Dave Prazak and Ace Steel booked on the show, who are good friends with Punk. My wife came up and said, 'Punk's gonna do a run-in on the match, do you mind?' I said, 'Of course I don't mind. This is 10 minutes before the show, not something I booked.' That's how it happened. I think it's because his buddies were booked on the show." Just kind of circumstance and luck based on who I had booked that it worked out the way it did. I never saw Punk at the building. Can I 100% confirm it was him? No. I can say I'm 99.9% certain it was him. It's a cool thing for the area and the promotion. This surprise appearance begs the question as to whether he has popped up in any other indie wrestling events without anybody knowing. According to Fightful, they were contacted by a source that confirmed that this isn't the first time this has happened, and Punk has appeared under a hood or a mask on multiple occasions throughout his retirement. One known incident took place at an event hosted by Freelance Wrestling 4 years prior to the masked GTS incident. This one would go down in CM Punk's hometown of Chicago, Illinois. In April 2019, shortly following that MKE show, images surfaced of a hooded man at the Freelance Wrestling Raw Power event on December 4th, 2015. The man would accompany a wrestler called Kikataro to the ring for his freeway match against Darren Corbin, and no, I didn't make that up, and Dick Justice. The mysterious figure was seen in a cloak tossing salt around ahead of the match. He was referred to on commentary as Kikataro's nameless mentor and wouldn't physically get involved in the match. And quickly, just before we continue, make sure you scroll down and drop a like and subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss any upcoming wrestling content as we head towards 20,000 subscribers. But now that you've done that, let's get on with the rest of the video. According to Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful, the reveal of this nameless mentor was set to be made on an episode of Colt Cabana's Wrestling Road Diaries 3 web series, but this was scrapped after legal issues between the two caused them to fall out. The legal issues of course stemmed from that famous podcast hosted by Cabana where Punk disparaged WWE and their doctor Chris Amann before the doctor sued the duo for defamation. They eventually won the case, but Cabana later sued Punk claiming that he owed him legal fees that he promised him. That case was later dismissed, but it led to heat between the two former best friends. But getting back on track, Wrestling Road Diaries was a documentary series produced by Colt Cabana and was centered around himself, his friend and Scottish independent wrestler Grado, as well as the previously mentioned Kikataro, all three known for their unique comedy styles. It seems that an angle on the documentary was to lead to the unmasking of the nameless mentor. However, as mentioned, the footage never saw the light of day. It's unknown if the reveal was ever filmed or if it exists at all, but the show was released in December 2016 with no CM Punk in sight. The creators of the documentary were reached out to by Fightful, but no comment was made. This story was backed up by Robbie Fox of Barstool Sports, who tweeted, "This isn't the first time Punk has done this for what it's worth. He's appeared at indie shows as a masked character for years now. It doesn't happen on a regular basis, but it's happened like 3 or 4 times since 2015, I believe. Some of it was filmed for Wrestling Road Diaries 3, but I believe Colt and Punk had their fallout before that was released and it got cut." Whilst Punk is set to make his official return to wrestling this Friday at AEW's First Dance, it won't be the first time he's been seen in the squared circle since his infamous WWE exit in 2014. To this day, Punk hasn't addressed the appearances, and it's unlikely that he ever will. It's clear though that he hasn't forgot his roots, and after having the passion beaten out of him in WWE, he just wanted to have some fun and enjoy himself. Whilst we know only of 2 confirmed appearances, the fact that the rest remain a secret and the fact that we had to hear about the others through the grapevine shows that he didn't do it for the fame or the recognition, but to reconnect with his first love, pro wrestling. And before you go, why not check out my video where I discuss 5 ways that AEW could book the debut of CM Punk.